Have you ever had to make a choice where every single option looks bad? A choice between instant disaster and a future that comes with a very heavy price tag. Today, we're diving into the story of a king who was stuck right there, facing an impossible decision that saved his kingdom but ended up staining his legacy forever. This is the story of Ahaz.
And that right there is the question at the heart of his entire story. Ahaz chose to survive, but believe me, the bill eventually came due in ways he probably never saw coming. So let's keep this in our minds as we go. When your back is against the wall, what price is just too high to pay for survival? All right, let's get into it.
So to really get why Ahaz did what he did, you have to picture the situation he was in. We're not talking about a little political trouble here. We're talking about a kingdom on the absolute edge of collapse.
Okay, so imagine this. You're just 20 years old. You've just been handed the keys to the kingdom, the historic throne of the Davidic dynasty. And before you can even get settled, your whole world starts to fall apart. That was the reality for King Ahaz. He was young, he was inexperienced, and he was facing a threat that could wipe his kingdom right off the map.
And this wasn't just some small border dispute. You had two neighboring kings, Pekah of Israel and Rezin of Aram Damascus, who teamed up with one goal in mind: to force Judah into their anti-Assyrian club. And if Ahaz said no, well, the plan was to invade, kick him off the throne, and put their own puppet king in his place. So yeah, the very survival of his reign was on the line.
And this threat wasn't just talk. It was devastatingly real. The book of 2 Chronicles reports a truly catastrophic loss. 120,000 Judean soldiers killed by the northern kingdom of Israel in a single day. Now, whether that number is totally literal or more symbolic, the point is crystal clear. Judah was getting crushed, and Ahaz was losing this war badly.
So in this moment of just absolute crisis, Ahaz gets presented with two very, very different paths to salvation. One comes from a prophet, and the other comes from his own political calculations.
You can really see the two choices laid out here. On one side, you've got the prophet Isaiah, who shows up and basically says, hey, stand firm, don't make any deals, trust God, and he'll take care of this. But on the other side, you have Ahaz's own brain, doing the political math. And the math says the only power strong enough to save him is the massive Assyrian Empire, the very empire his enemies want him to fight against.
To prove his point, Isaiah tells Ahaz, look, ask for any sign you want from God, anything. But Ahaz refuses. Maybe it was false humility, maybe it was just a total lack of faith. So Isaiah gives him a sign anyway, this incredibly famous prophecy of a child named Emmanuel, which means God with us. It was a promise that God hadn't abandoned Judah. But for a king who's watching his army get slaughtered, a promise about a baby being born in the future, it might have felt a little too abstract and way too slow.
So you've got this divine promise over here, and a very real, very scary military threat over there. What does Ahaz do? He ignores the prophet and decides to make a deal with the biggest, baddest empire on the block.
And he doesn't hesitate. Ahaz goes into the Lord's temple and his own palace, strips them of silver and gold, and sends it all as a gift to the Assyrian king, Tiglath-Pileser III. His message was basically, I'm your servant, I'm your son, come and save me. He was literally buying protection with sacred money.
And here's the cool part. This is where history and the biblical text line up perfectly. We've actually found Assyrian records from that time that list tribute payments received from Jehoahaz of Judah. That's our guy, Ahaz. So the deal worked. Assyria came in and smashed his enemies, but the price was steep. Judah was no longer an independent kingdom. It was now a vassal state. Basically, Judah was saved, but it wasn't its own boss anymore.
So the immediate danger was over, but man, the long-term consequences of that deal were just getting started. The price for Assyria's protection was way more than just gold and silver. It was going to cost Judah its very identity.
This timeline shows just how fast everything changed. In 734 BC, Ahaz sends his SOS. Just 2 years later, his enemies are gone, and he's traveling to Damascus to officially bow down to the Assyrian king. But it's what happens there that kicks off a huge religious crisis back home. And then, by 722, the northern kingdom of Israel, the same kingdom that was threatening him, his new protectors just wiped them off the map completely.
So what happened in Damascus? Well, Ahaz sees an altar, probably an Assyrian pagan one, and he loves it. He's so impressed he actually sends a blueprint back to the high priest in Jerusalem with an order, build me one of these. And when he gets back, he literally shoves aside the sacred bronze altar from Solomon's temple and starts using this new, foreign one for sacrifices. And it didn't stop there.
That one act of compromise, it just opened the floodgates. The sources tell us that Ahaz eventually shut down parts of the temple completely and started setting up pagan altars on pretty much every street corner in Jerusalem. You have to wonder, was he just trying to please his new bosses? Or, after seeing how powerful Assyria was, did he actually start to think their gods were stronger than his own? Either way, it was a complete spiritual breakdown.
So how are we supposed to look back on a king like this? He saved his people from being annihilated, but you could argue he sold his kingdom's soul to do it. The final verdict on his reign is this messy mix of success and failure.
Let's just break it down. Politically, hey, the guy was a survivor. He navigated an impossible crisis and came out the other side. But internationally, he gave away his kingdom's independence. Religiously, his reign was an absolute disaster. Idolatry everywhere, desecrating the temple. Prophetically, he's remembered as the king who heard the promise of God with us and decided to trust an empire instead. The one tiny silver lining? He was the father of Hezekiah, who would grow up to be one of Judah's greatest religious reformers.
But the Bible gives us one final, chilling judgment. Even though he was a king from the line of David, Ahaz was considered so unfaithful that he was denied burial in the royal tombs. It was a huge, posthumous dishonor, a powerful final statement on how he was remembered. And that brings us all the way back to where we started. Was he a pragmatic leader just doing what he had to do to save his nation? Or was he a faithless king who threw his God under the bus for a quick fix? The answer is probably somewhere in that gray area in between, and it leaves us with that timeless leadership dilemma. What are you willing to sacrifice just to survive?